I've got wonderful news. This video is going to radically improve how you play World of Warcraft. And yes, you will perform better, but far more importantly, you'll be more comfortable, and that will make the game more fun. Now, WoW development follows a bit of a rhythm, right? Every time a spec gets a rework, abilities tend to get pruned, but then, slowly over time, abilities get added back and back and back, often to the stage where they need another pruning. And for most classes, we're right before that final step, because between hero talents, the utility arms race, and class design slowly getting a bit more complicated, well, a lot of us are going to need a better keybinding strategy. So maybe you're a returning player who's struggling, maybe you just want to use this opportunity to make a proper fresh start. Either way, we've made this keybinding guide for you, and the immense time that's been put into it is made possible because of our members over at Bellular.games. That is our home in the internet. It's where we post loads of exclusive content, as an example, for The War Within. We've got hours and hours of the Lore Walking podcast for you to listen to. Our videos go up there early and ad-free, as well as written guide content, and there's a bunch of that for The War Within. It is the #1 way that you can help me steer this ship in a more positive, sustainable direction, and here we all appreciate your support deeply. With that said, let's get into it, starting with the planner. First things first, after you watch this video, grab our keybinding planner. This is the most up-to-date, the best version of this tool that we've ever made. I absolutely love it. So you can grab a copy for yourself and then plug in the buttons that you feel comfortable using for each category. Once you've done that, just go to the class page and voila, you will see a full set of suggested ability placements. Now, we've organized binds and buttons by what they do so you can plan them out and stay consistent between all of your characters. It even includes any new hero talent buttons, so their sudden appearance next week is not going to ruin your keybinding setup. Now, I would recommend at least trying the default bindings out. Those are really good ones. We put a hell of a lot of work into making sure that they actually make sense. So you can check that out using the link below. But of course, a tool without any context isn't that useful, so let's get into the details. First question, why bother changing your keybinds? I mean, if what you're doing right now works, then great. But we're getting ready to put an unholy amount of hours smashing buttons, so because of that, we may as well use the downtime to get something that is better, especially because there will be way more regular gameplay to do with delves. So trust me, you will want to have your defensives and your crowd control and those little things that you maybe just don't use as much as you should. You'll want to have those on your keybinds, easy to use. Now, the real reason here is it all makes the game more fun to play. Nothing is as frustrating as wanting to hit a button, but you just get to that button a second too late, and you miss the interrupt, and you feel like a big dingus. Now, when I say more fun, it really falls under 3 categories. Number 1, it literally will make you a better player. You'll be amazed to realize how much better the game can be to play when you just press your buttons automatically, because it's all down to muscle memory, and you've got a consistent plan across all of your characters. It's so much better than, having to think, which is slow. The second reason is it'll make you a more happy player. Life after binding your mounts, your teleports, food, and things like that is so much better. Having an easy mount key with a modifier for the Grand Expedition Yak is genuinely a game changer. It's so handy. And the third reason is to stop hurting yourself. RSI is no laughing matter, and easy keybinds can reduce the risk of that pretty drastically. So, let's get stuck in then. Here are the things that you can do right now to save yourself loads of future headaches. If you change anything today, learn to strafe, because by default, the game has you turning with the A and D keys, and that's honestly kinda terrible. I mean, keyboard turner used to be a derogatory term for a reason. If you learn to turn your character with your mouse while using A and D to strafe, you'll find just it's immensely, infinitely more efficient. You'll be able to dodge swirlies with a quick tap of a button. Now, some people even swear by changing the S key so that they literally can't backpedal again, but that's a little bit more of a divisive one. Next, stop using keys you can't reach. Anything past 5 in the keyboard is going to be hard for most people. Sending one of your fingers to Narnia somewhere at the far end of the function row is just not comfortable. Now, this may require getting rid of some default Blizzard key bindings, like C for your character sheet. Learning to use a key like Y for your character sheet then frees up C, which is one of your keyboard's best buttons. It's right where your left hand is. And the same goes for keys like Z, X, and V. So for most people, 1 through 4, and then Q, E, R, and F make up a solid set of core binds that, with multipliers, will be able to cover pretty much everything. Now you should be using your mouse buttons. Even if you just have a regular mouse with a back and a forward button, those are actually amazing for instant access to things like bubbles, taunts, or interrupts, but you do have to be careful. Blizzard added in default mouse overcasting to WoW a while ago, but for some completely insane reason, it doesn't work with mouse buttons, which is a real pain. Blizzard, please, if you fix something, that would be lovely. Anyway, middle mouse button and mouse scroll up and mouse scroll down are also incredible, but if you're doing stuff with your scroll wheel, do be sure to rebind your zoom in and out to something else, as an example using shift and scroll. This next point's kind of obvious if you think about it, so think about what your hand is actually doing. So if you're following our advice, right, you're going to be using your fingers for most of your rotation and for your movement. Naturally then, that means it's time to use your lovely opposable thumb. That's one of the cool things we get being a human. You should use that for off the global cooldown things, because while your fingers are busy, your thumb can be using those. Things like images, shimmer, certain defensives, or perhaps your interrupts. Now that's why our keybinding planner defaults to X, C, and V for speed boosts and CCs. It's also why the instant access section is mouse buttons, because your mouse hand will typically be far more free. Moving on then, we've got modifier keys. So once you get out of the easy to reach area, using modifiers instead of faraway keys is absolutely the play. Of course, most people will find shift to be the easiest, and we account for that. Most of your common abilities should be in the raw keys, and then less common ones should be using the shift modifier. Now, control and alt modifiers can be used. They're generally harder for most people, or at least less intuitive, especially while you're moving your character, so perhaps use those for keys that you press rarely. As an example, in our planner, we mostly use out of combat utility and buffs on the control keys. Of course, just be careful of specific combos. Things like Control Z and Alt V may feel a little bit awkward to you. Next then, here's my penultimate basic tip. And this is a giant upgrade, even for a casual setup. What you should do is find two nice keys for the interact key and the extra action button. The interact key can just save you so much time and so much clicking, because now you can just run up to an NPC or a quest objective and press the interact key instead of having to click on things, which is way more convenient. And that's especially good because most quest items are used when interacting with the right NPC. It is fantastic. Then the final tip, and it's a simple one, is to turn on mouse overcasting. Not needing to click on a target or an ally before throwing, say, a heal on them is a literal, a massive difference in the world of healing or off healing. So let's just say you are a paladin, tank, or DPS, but it would be pretty cool to be able to throw a lay on hands on someone who's almost dead. It's way nicer to just flick your mouse over their unit frame and hit the lay on hands key, rather than having to move to the frame, click in the frame, and then hit the key. It's way quicker. Now for DPS or tanks, multi-dotting, interrupting, or taunting without having to swap from your main target is also a massive quality of life improvement. Say you just want to throw a dot and something over there. Just mouse over, hit the button, and that's it. It's done. You don't have to retarget or anything. So that's the basic tips. Maybe you already do those, or maybe you just want more ideas. So let's move on to the more advanced tips. The first one is to group keybinds together in a way that makes sense to you. As an example in our planner, where defensives, movement, and CC are blocked off into their own categories. So, using a key like V for an interrupt, and then Shift V for a stop, or like a knockback, something like Typhoon, that means that you build the instinct to hit the V key to stop a mob cast. And if you do that across all of your different characters, you'll just be way more effective, because then when your brain is overloaded in the middle of a dungeon, but you notice a cast just at the last second, you don't need to think. You just need to hit the key because it's consistent in all your characters. And the same goes for defensives. Having abilities in the same blocks so that you can just mash or cycle through them is real handy. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you press Divine Protection, Shield of Vengeance, or Divine Shield. All you need to do is hit the button that prevents you from dying. Another then is to build your bars in a way that makes sense to you. If you've got an opener that asks you to use abilities in a certain order, maybe you could put them in that order. Then it's right there for you. Say if you're a sub-rogue who, for example, is going to be using Sepsis before Flagellation. Perhaps if your bars reflect that, you don't really need to remember it. Then the next tip is there for the multi-classers. Across specs and classes, put the same kind of ability on the same key wherever possible. Say abilities in the 40-second cooldown range go on the F key. That's things like Secret Technique, Wake Wake of Ashes, and Apocalypse. By having those consistent bindings based on the cooldown time, you'll actually build that rough timing just into your brain across playing all of those different characters. And of course, the same goes for other things. Say your dots go in 3 and 4, maybe your spenders go in Q. Suddenly, right, if you go back to, say, Shadow Priest after you've been playing Balance for a while, you'll find that your fingers actually do all the work for you, and your brain doesn't really need to do that much. Now, this next one is mostly for ranged players, but think about movement. Having your instant casts be on buttons that you can press while you're strafing goes a long, long way. As an example, Frost's Ice Lance. Having that on something that your middle finger can hit, like 2, means that you can freely strafe to the position that you want while still being able to use that ability. Small things like that can help you keep your DPS up while also dodging the many, many mechanics of the War Within's dungeons. Now, the last advanced tip is to plan around your off GCDs and your GCD combos, because with most cooldowns being off the GCD, you should be able to hit those and then instantly hit an ability afterward. A great example here is Avenging Wrath for Paladins. If you're using your ring finger to activate Avenging Wrath, make sure you can hit Templar's Verdict or Wake of Ashes right after using your index or middle finger. And this goes extra for those very tight windows like, say, Pillar of Frost or Symbols of Death. You can, of course, macro around these situations too, which probably means it's time for us to talk about macros and add-ons. Macros are a little bit mixed here. They can be cumbersome to use unless you're a very, very advanced player, but I do think they're worth mentioning. Like the example I just mentioned of combining off GCDs. So a Frost DK can add Raise Dead to Pillar of Frost, just have that in a macro, and then they'll save themselves a keybind. Sub-rogues can add Shadow Strike to Shadow Dance using a macro, and maybe that'll get them a few more milliseconds, and I'm sure those milliseconds will be the difference between you being a Parse King or not. Then, there are Help Harm macros. These are awesome. These will change which spell is cast depending on if your target is an ally or an enemy. So if you're a healer and you want to save some keybinds, that can be amazing. And there are some examples of this in the planner linked below. Most of their use case, though, is just for saving action bar space, not really keyboard space. Next then, add-ons. One of the best ones is Opie. It lets you create custom rings with abilities that you can use by just holding down a key and then selecting a slice of the ring with your mouse. Now, this is not responsive enough for use like within combat, but say if you've got out-of-combat buffs to apply to your team, maybe mounts, food, toys, teleports, changing spec, or just about anything else, well, with Opie, you can turn one key into like 10 or more functions, and that's even without customizing it yourself or importing rings from WoW. It actually comes with built-in ones for quest items and also for travel, and it's a total lifesaver. I mean, imagine all of your Hearthstones on one button. And then an honorary mention to Click. So this is actually something that's built into the game and called click casting. What it allows you to do is keybind actions as clicks and unit frames instead of your action bars. It's a little bit like the mouse over option, but of course with separate binds for your bars. And basically it means, like, say you have just a basic heal that you use all the time, or maybe something you always apply like Renew or a Hot. Well, this could actually make it so that if you left click somebody's unit frame, it will do that spellcast. Or if you shift left click, it'll do something else. So especially for healers, that kind of thing can be a bit of a lifesaver. And really, that's it. Now, there is also dialogue key Dragonflight, which lets you use number keys, and the spacebar for dialogue and pop-up windows, which I suppose counts for this video. But anyway, before we go, this is maybe our best advice for your keybinds, and it comes from the fighting game community. Muscle memory develops during rest periods. So what you should do is set up your shiny new keybinds, and then just go to town on a target dummy or do an easy dungeon, and then rest your fingers for a bit. Maybe even take a nap, or come back tomorrow after you've slept, because when you're asleep, your brain just locks in all that goodness for later. Do that enough, and you will find you can take to whatever new key bindings you develop for yourself, and then it will go smooth, and you will have more fun playing World of Warcraft. So I hope that today's video is helpful to you. I hope you have fun with our key binding planner. You can check it out down below. But anyway, that's it for me, and if you would like to check out what class I'm going to be maining in this expansion, and how you should go about selecting your main, well, check out this video next.